Harvey Langston had never planned to raise kids again. Not after burying his wife and their baby girl in the same cold February. That winter broke something in him. Some inner light went out, and he never tried lighting it again. For 5 years, the old house on the edge of Pecan Hollow sat in near silence. Harvey moved slow, talked less, and only ever smiled when the horses were near. The rest of the time, he kept to himself. Folks in town said he was kind, just hollowed out. He didn't mind. After all, what was left for a man who'd lost everything he ever loved? That's why no one could understand how 2 5-year-old girls ended up standing on his porch one hot morning in July, sweaty, scared, and barefoot. They didn't knock, just stood there with red cheeks and dirt-stained dresses, clutching each other's hands like their lives depended on it. He nearly dropped the feed sack in his arms. They were twins, no doubt. Same round cheeks, same wide brown eyes. Their hair, a mix of waves and curls, looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. One had a scrape on her knee, the other a swollen lip. They didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared up at him like maybe he was their last chance. Harvey didn't ask questions right away. He crouched down slow, like one would to a spook colt, and said, "You girls hungry?" Both nodded, just once, like they practiced it. He led them inside, made them sit at the table, and poured them glasses of water. They drank like they'd never had enough before. He fixed toast with peach preserves and watched them eat, barely chewing, like someone might snatch it away. It wasn't until they were done that one of them finally spoke. Her voice was scratchy, quiet but steady. "Mama's gone. She left us near the edge of the woods." The other added, "She said we're too fat. She said no one wants girls who eat too much." That was the moment something old and cold inside Harvey cracked. Not all the way, just enough to let in a flicker of anger and sorrow and something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He sat back in the chair and stared at the floor for a while. He didn't know these girls, didn't know who their stepmother was or why she'd do such a thing. But what he did know was this: no child deserved to feel thrown away. He didn't sleep that night, just paced the porch while the moon rose slow and low over the hills. In his head, the girls' voices played on a loop. Too fat, as if that was some kind of sin. They were just babies, soft, wide-eyed little girls who liked butter on their toast and held hands when they slept. He learned their names the next morning: Clara and Joe. Clara was the quieter one, with the thoughtful gaze and chipped front tooth. Joe was sharper, quicker to speak, but flinched every time someone raised a voice. Even the rooster crowing made her tense. They didn't know where their real daddy was. "He died. Maybe," Clara said. "She never told us much." That she was the stepmother, a woman named Marion who, by the girls' stories, sounded more like a storm than a mother. Cold meals, locked doors, screamed at them for using too much soap, told them they looked like lazy cows when they asked for seconds. And then one day, she'd loaded them in her buggy, told them they were going on a picnic, and left them at the edge of the woods. Left a threadbare blanket and walked off. She didn't even look back, Joe whispered. Harvey kept his voice steady when he said, "She's not coming back." They didn't cry, not in front of him. He figured they'd already learned not to. That day, he hitched up his wagon and took the girls into town. Folks stared. No one said much until he walked into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Rowland turned away from his coffee and blinked like he was seeing ghosts. "Harvey, who are?" "They need help," Harvey said simply. The girls stood behind him, holding onto the sides of his coat. The sheriff listened, took notes, promised to find Marion. Harvey wasn't sure if he believed him. That night, the girls slept in the same bed, curled tight like puppies in winter. Harvey sat in the hallway, listening. There were no sobs, no talking, just soft breathing and a silence that hurt. In the days that followed, Harvey tried to give them space, but they stuck close, helped feed the hens, brushed the horses, even tried sweeping the porch. Joe wanted to ride a pony. Clara preferred to read, slowly, mouthing each word as she went. They still didn't laugh, but they didn't flinch as much. Not after Harvey fixed the door hinges and promised there'd be no locks here. He let them eat what they wanted, never once mentioned their weight. When Joe asked if they were too big to be loved, he didn't answer right away. He crouched to her eye level and said, "You're just right. Both of you." The next morning, Joe hugged him around the leg and didn't let go for a full minute. It was a slow shift, like spring after a long snow. But Harvey felt it. The way their footsteps began to echo through the house. The way their drawings appeared on the walls. The sound of their chatter at breakfast. It wasn't quiet anymore. He didn't realize how much he'd missed that noise. Life moving around him, even in small ways. But it wasn't over. Not really. Because one afternoon, while he was out feeding the colts, a black carriage rode up the lane. It was Marion, dressed fine, smelling of roses, and already looking annoyed. "I heard you took them in," she said, stepping down like she owned the place. Harvey stayed still. The girls were inside, unaware. "I'm here to get them back," Marion said, brushing dust from her gloves. "They're mine, and you've got no legal right." "No," Harvey said before she finished. Her jaw dropped. "You can't keep them. They're not animals, Marion. You left them in the woods." "I was overwhelmed." "You almost got them killed." She tried to push past him. He stepped in front. "You touch either of those girls," he said, voice low, "I'll see to it you never come near them again." She left in a cloud of dust and curses. That night, he sat them down and asked if they wanted to stay. Joe nodded hard. Clara asked, "Can we?" "Only if you want." They didn't even hesitate. And that's when he knew. This wasn't something temporary. They weren't strays he'd feed and send on their way. They were his girls now. And somehow, they'd saved him just as much as he'd saved them. Before Harvey Langston had two little girls chasing chickens across his yard. He had a hollowed-out life and a barn full of things he hadn't touched in years. Everything in that house still whispered his late wife's name. Her yellow apron still hung by the back door. Her hairbrush stayed on the windowsill, a few long strands of honey-brown hair still tangled in it. The room they had painted for their daughter, pale lavender with stars on the ceiling, had been locked for 5 years. He never opened it. Couldn't bear to. That room held too much hope, too much grief. Back when Harvey was 27, he'd been known for his quiet strength. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, and didn't waste words. Lydia, his wife, used to tease him for it. "You say more in silence than most men say with their mouths," she'd laugh, wrapping her arms around his waist. She was light where he was dark, full of life where he was full of caution. And when she died during childbirth, with their baby girl gone an hour later, Harvey had sat on the front steps for 3 days straight. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, just listened to the wind moving through the trees. After that, he didn't let anyone close. People tried. The preacher stopped by now and then. So did old Mrs. Cattleman from the church, bringing pies he never ate. And Ben Talbot, his only real friend, came over every spring to help him mend the fence line and drink coffee in silence. But none of it touched that locked place in his chest. He didn't want it to. Ben was the first person Harvey called after the girls showed up. "You're not going to believe this," Harvey said into the receiver. Ben didn't miss a beat. "You found a woman?" "No. 2 kids. 5 years old. Twins." There was a long pause. "Whose are they?" Harvey told him everything. By the time he finished, Ben had already hitched his wagon. Ben arrived an hour later, dusty and sweaty, but grinning when he saw the girls. He knelt down in the dirt, eye to eye with them, and said, "Well now, you must be trouble." Joe giggled. Clara blinked slowly but didn't pull away. Ben stayed for dinner and didn't stop talking the whole time. He told silly stories, asked about their favorite animals, even whistled through his teeth until Joe tried copying him. Harvey watched it all, stunned, the way Ben just slipped into the rhythm of it. Like this wasn't strange at all. Just 2 little girls at a kitchen table with jam on their chins and 1,000 unspoken fears in their chests. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Ben leaned back in his chair. "You know this ain't gonna be easy, right?" "I know. They've got eyes like kicked dogs. Whoever raised them, if you can call it that, did some damage." "I know that too." Ben nodded. Still, might be the best damn thing to happen to you. Harvey didn't answer, but deep down, something in him agreed. The next few weeks stretched long. Clara and Joe were sweet but full of scars. Joe hated closed doors, panicked if she couldn't see Harvey. Clara folded her clothes in perfect squares, wouldn't touch sweets, and jumped at loud voices. Neither girl liked to sleep in the dark. So Harvey left the lantern on in the hallway and made a habit of checking on them every few hours. Each time, he'd find them tangled together under the covers, holding hands in their sleep. He started taking them to town with him, mostly to keep an eye on them, but partly to get them used to people again. It was slow going. The general store was first. They clung to his coat. Mr. Billings, the store owner, gave him peppermint sticks, and Joe smiled for the first time in public. Then came the schoolhouse. Harvey didn't know what he was doing there. Just stood outside and watched the children play. Joe watched too. Clara stayed behind him, gripping his hand. Miss Helen, the school teacher, stepped out to greet them. She was a woman in her 30s with ink-stained fingers and a calm way about her. She crouched down, not smiling too big, not touching, just talking. "I've got books and paints inside," she said softly. "You can come look anytime you like." The girls didn't speak, but Clara's eyes flicked toward the doorway. After that, Miss Helen came to visit once a week. Brought books, drawing paper, and a kind voice. She never pressed, never asked too many questions. Just sat with them. One afternoon, Clara climbed onto her lap without a word. Joe started calling her Miss Henny. Harvey stood in the corner that day, arms crossed, fighting a lump in his throat. It wasn't just Miss Helen who started noticing. People in town began to talk. Some thought it was sweet, Harvey Langston raising girls. Others weren't so kind. Whispers started. Marion, the stepmother, had started her own tale. Claimed Harvey had kidnapped them. Said she'd made a mistake leaving them, but was trying to do better. Claimed he was twisting the story. The sheriff tried to stay neutral, but Harvey could see doubt in his eyes. Then, one Saturday, Marion returned, this time with a man in a suit from Fort Worth. Said his name was Mr. Dent, a lawyer. He stepped out of the carriage and handed Harvey a folded paper. "Custody petition. She has a legal case," Dent said flatly. "Unless you can prove abuse, this won't be easy." The girls heard the yelling. Joe ran behind the chicken coop. Clara sat on the porch steps and stared at the road, her face blank. Harvey didn't yell back, just folded the paper and looked at Marion with a steady glare. "You didn't want them," he said, "and I won't let you hurt them again." Mr. Dent cleared his throat. "The court will decide that, Mr. Langston." That night, Clara woke up screaming. It was the first time Harvey saw her lose control. Her whole body shook, and she clawed at the covers like she was drowning. Joe clung to her, but it didn't help. Harvey scooped her up, held her against his chest, and rocked her while she sobbed and kicked. "She'll take us," she cried. "She'll take us back and lock us in the closet again." Harvey didn't speak, just held her tighter. In that moment, something inside him set like concrete. There would be no going back, no giving up. He would fight for them with every breath he had. The next morning, he rode into town, found the sheriff, found a lawyer, found Miss Helen, everyone who'd seen the bruises, the fear, the change in those girls. He gathered statements, copies of old reports from neighbors who'd heard the screaming back when Marion still lived in that rundown shack outside Dry Fork. Miss Helen offered to testify. "I saw enough," she said, voice like steel. "No loving mother calls her daughters cows. No good woman locks children in a shed." Ben offered to stand too. He'd been the one to drive Harvey to the edge of the woods weeks back, found the blankets still there, worn and half buried in dirt. Proof. The court date came fast. Harvey brought the girls with him, not to testify, but because he couldn't bear to leave them alone. The courthouse was too big, the wooden benches too hard. Marion sat across the room with her polished shoes and practiced tears. Mr. Dent spoke about biological rights, intent to reclaim, and familial bonds. Harvey didn't say much, just gave a statement, calm and direct. When asked why he took them in, his answer was simple. They were left like trash. but they're not trash. They're my girls now." The judge, a tired man with too many lines on his face, listened, read every paper, looked over every report. Then he asked the girls to come forward. Clara held Joe's hand and walked up bravely. The judge knelt beside them, asked if they knew what was happening. "We don't want to go," Clara said, eyes wide and clear. "She hurt us." Joe added, "We want to stay with Mr. Harvey." The judge looked at Harvey, then at Marion, and finally back at the girls. His decision took 2 minutes. Permanent guardianship granted to Harvey Langston. Marion screamed, tried to protest, was removed from the room. The girls clung to Harvey's sides, trembling but relieved. That night, back home, Clara brought him the old key to the lavender room. "We want to sleep here now," she said. Harvey opened the door for the first time in 5 years. The paint had faded. Dust covered the windowsill, but the stars on the ceiling still glowed faintly. They laid their blankets on the floor and fell asleep under the stars. Harvey sat in the hallway again, but this time he smiled. Summer came slow and warm to Pecan Hollow that year, the kind that baked the earth dry by noon but left the evenings soft and gold. On Harvey Langston's small patch of land, things started to feel different. Not loud or flashy, just steadier. The quiet that used to hang heavy in his home had changed. It wasn't the silence of grief anymore. It was the kind that comes with peace. The kind filled with the hum of 2 little girls learning how to live. Clara started leaving her shoes by the door instead of keeping them next to her bed, just in case someone made her walk again. Joe stopped counting every bite she took during meals. Harvey didn't mention it, just kept putting butter on her biscuits and honey on her cornbread like it was the most normal thing in the world. It took a while, but the girls started laughing more. Little giggles during breakfast, soft whispers as they brushed the horses, even loud, belly-deep laughs when Ben brought over his hound dog and it licked Claire's whole face. Ben had become a fixture by then. Every few days, he'd show up around dusk with fresh tobacco, pie, or with just a new story about someone in town. He never treated the girls like they were fragile. He taught them how to spit watermelon seeds, how to throw a lasso, sort of, and how to whistle real sharp through their teeth. Clara, always more quiet, liked to sit beside him on the porch swing, legs swinging, listening. Joe, on the other hand, chased chickens and asked questions until sundown. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Ben looked over at Harvey and said, "You've changed." Harvey didn't answer right away. "You sleep better now," Ben added. "Don't carry that storm around like you used to." Harvey gave a small nod. "I think I forgot how to be alive for a while." They reminded me. Down the hall, the girls' soft chatter filtered out. Clara reading out loud, Joe interrupting every few words. It was messy. It was life. They started doing chores without being asked, feeding the hens, gathering eggs, helping Harvey mend a broken fence rail. At first, Harvey tried to make things easier for them. But Miss Helen, who visited often and knew more about children than he ever would, told him plainly, "Don't baby them. Let them help. Let them feel needed." So he did, and it worked. Joe loved hammering nails, though her aim was wild. Clara preferred the garden. She talked to the tomato plants like they were shy friends that needed encouragement. Harvey taught them how to check for weeds, how to spot rabbit prints, how to know when the soil was thirsty. Every evening, the 3 of them would walk the garden rows together, fingers brushing leaves, boots kicking up dust. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days. Clara had nightmares sometimes. Joe cried when she couldn't find her blanket one morning and wouldn't say why. There were sudden mood swings, moments of deep silence. But there was healing too, and Harvey could see it, like watching tiny shoots break through dry ground. One small moment, in particular, stayed with him. They were sitting by the creek one afternoon. Joe was skipping stones, Harvey whittling a stick, Clara drawing in the dirt with her finger. Out of nowhere, Joe looked over and asked, "Do you think Mama knew how to love?" Harvey didn't answer too quick. He never did when it mattered. "I don't think she knew how to be a mama," he finally said. "But she gave birth to us," Joe pressed. That don't make her a mother. Clara's eyes stayed on the dirt. Then how do you know you are one? Harvey set down his stick and looked at them both. You don't always know. You just show up every day, even when you're tired. You feed and clothe and fight for them. And when they're scared, you stay. That's love. They didn't say anything for a while. But Joe leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Then you're the only mama we've had." He didn't correct her. Weeks passed. Clara started writing little notes and leaving them around the house. "I fed the hens," or "I like the sound your boots make." Joe made up songs, loud and terrible, and insisted on singing them during supper. Harvey fixed the old porch swing and made a deal. If they swept the porch every morning, he'd push them on it every evening. One afternoon, they brought home a stray kitten. Joe had stuffed it in her satchel and grinned like a thief. "We found it behind the schoolhouse," she said. "He's ours now." Harvey wasn't a cat person, but when he saw how Clara held it, like something fragile that finally belonged, he said nothing. They named it Pickles. The kitten took to Harvey faster than he wanted. It followed him through the barn, slept on his bed, and knocked over his coffee cup twice. But it made the girls laugh, so he let it stay. School started again in the fall. Miss Helen had arranged everything. New shoes, secondhand dresses, even a pair of lunch pails with their names painted on. Harvey drove them in the wagon on the first day. Clara was nervous. Joe buzzed with excitement. At the schoolhouse steps, Clara turned and asked, "What if they don't like us?" Harvey crouched beside her. "You're not for everyone to like. Just be kind. Be yourselves." Clara nodded. Joe grinned. "If they're mean, I'll kick their shins." Harvey raised an eyebrow. "Only if it's really bad," she amended. They both waved as they disappeared inside. Harvey waited longer than he needed to, just watching the doorway. The house felt too quiet without them. He wandered from room to room, checked on Pickles, and eventually sat on the porch until the sun tilted west. When the school bell rang that afternoon, he was already waiting. They came running, dresses flapping, cheeks red. "Miss Henny said Clara reads like a fourth grader," Joe panted. And Joe drew a snake with arms, Clara said, clearly unimpressed. Harvey couldn't stop smiling. Later that week, Joe came home with a hand-drawn picture of their family. Stick figures, Harvey with a big hat, Clara holding a book, Joe with a slingshot, and Pickles on someone's head. On top, she'd written, "My real dad." Harvey didn't say a word, just folded the paper and tucked it into the pocket of his coat. It stayed there for weeks. Word got around town that Harvey Langston wasn't so hollow anymore. Miss Helen started visiting for dinner, sometimes just with books, other times with her hair loose and stories of her own lonely childhood. Harvey began to notice things. How she always sat close to Clara, how she tied Joe's shoes with patient fingers. The girls took to her quickly. Joe once asked her if she'd ever think about being our other parent. Helen laughed. "That's not up to me." Harvey pretended not to hear, but his ears burned. One Saturday, the four of them rode into town for the harvest fair. The girls had never been before. They clutched his hands as they moved through crowds, eyes wide at the pumpkin pies, handmade quilts, and fiddlers playing near the hay wagons. Joe begged to try the apple bobbing. Clara watched from the side, chewing her lip. Harvey stood behind them both, one hand on each girl's shoulder. And when Joe came up with an apple in her teeth, soaked and triumphant, he whooped louder than anyone. People noticed. He saw them. Neighbors, merchants, old men who used to pity him, watching this new version of Harvey Langston. He didn't care. He wasn't doing it for them. That night, Clara curled up in the wagon, head on his lap, and whispered, "This was the best day of my life." Joe agreed, mouth full of kettle corn. They were asleep before the stars fully came out. But life has a way of testing happiness. Late one evening, Sheriff Rowland showed up again, this time with papers and a worn expression. "There's a woman asking questions," he said. "Not Marion. Someone who claims she's kin to the girls. Half-sister of their real father." Harvey felt the air leave his lungs. "What does she want?" "Don't know yet. She's out in Abilene." but she filed a request to learn about the girl's placement. If she pushes, the court may have to consider her. Harvey looked toward the hallway. The girls were brushing their teeth, giggling about something. "They don't need more strangers," he said flatly. "I know. I'll stall what I can." But it was a shadow now, a cold breath in the warmth. Harvey didn't tell the girls. Not yet, but the weight of it sat heavy. He started checking locks again, sat outside longer at night, kept their papers tucked close. And for the first time since that day in court, he felt fear again, not of what had been, but of what might still come. Because he'd built something steady. He'd let love back in, and now he had something to lose. But even in that shadow, the light held. Clara left a note on his nightstand one morning. Just one line in her neatest print. "You are not alone anymore." And somehow, that was enough to keep going. By the first frost, Harvey had started checking over his shoulder again. The letter from Abilene came on a Tuesday. A cold wind blew in with it. Sheriff Rowland delivered it himself, his shoulders tense beneath his coat. He didn't say much, just handed the envelope over and looked Harvey in the eye. "You should read it alone." Harvey waited until the girls were asleep. He sat at the kitchen table, lantern flickering, pickles curled around his boots, and unfolded the letter with hands that didn't shake but wanted to. The handwriting was neat and formal, with words that struck him like dull knives. The woman, Nellie McGraw, claimed to be the half-sister of the girl's father. Said she hadn't known about them until recently. Claimed she wanted to do the right thing and see if the girls might belong with family. Blood family. Harvey stared at the letter for a long time. He didn't care that she used the word belong. What stopped him cold was the fear curling up in his chest. A part of him, some ragged, quiet part, still believed that someone could show up and take them away. That because he wasn't their blood, because he wasn't young or well-read or proper, he wasn't enough. That no matter how many fences he mended or how much love he gave, it could be taken. He burned the letter in the stove before morning. But the feeling stayed. That week, he was different. He didn't laugh as loud. He got short with Joe when she knocked over the molasses jar, something he normally would have brushed off. Clara noticed. She didn't say anything, but she watched him closely, her big brown eyes tracking him like he might vanish. Joe, less subtle, blurted, "Why are you mad at us?" He crouched down and wrapped his arms around her. "I'm not, baby. I'm scared." "Of what?" "That someone might think I'm not good enough to be your daddy." Joe frowned. "That's stupid." He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. A few days later, Miss Helen came by. The girls ran to her like always, dragging her inside to show her drawings and their latest attempt at baking cornbread. She laughed and scolded gently and helped them wash flour off their arms. Later, when the girls were playing outside, she turned to Harvey. "What's going on?" He hesitated. Then he told her about the letter. Her face darkened. "Do you know anything about this woman?" "Nothing. Just a name and a claim." Helen sat beside him, silent for a moment. Then she said, "Do you ever wonder if they'd be better off with someone else?" Harvey stiffened. "Every day." She touched his hand. "That doesn't mean it's true." That night, he stood by the girls' bedroom door and watched them sleep. Clara had one arm flung across Joe's stomach, her face relaxed in sleep. Joe snored faintly. They looked safe. They looked home. But in his dreams, they were gone. The dreams came often after that. He'd be back in that lavender room, empty again, the walls echoing. Or worse, he'd see the girls in a stranger's house, eyes wide, their hands reaching for him through a window he couldn't open. He started waking up early, earlier than usual, fixing things that didn't need fixing. He even painted the barn doors, something he hadn't done in 10 years. Ben noticed the change. Showed up one morning with 2 mugs of coffee and said flat out, "Tell me what's eating you." Harvey hesitated. Then he said, "What if I've done all this loving just to lose it again?" Ben sat quietly for a minute, then loved them anyway. "I don't know if I could survive losing them." "You already survived losing one. You just forgot how strong you are." Harvey didn't reply. As Christmas approached, the girls buzzed with excitement. They'd never had a real one before. not one with cookies and a tree and handmade stockings. Harvey didn't know much about decorating, but Miss Helen did. She came over with garland, twine, and a paper bag full of cinnamon-scented things. The girls cut out stars and hearts and hung them crooked on the tree. Harvey carved them each a little horse from scrap wood and wrapped them in old cloth napkins. It should have been joyful, but the tension in Harvey's chest never eased. Every time he heard hoofbeats outside, his heart jumped. Every creak in the hallway made him sit up straighter in bed. Then, 3 days before Christmas, a letter arrived addressed to the girls. Clara read it aloud at the table. It was from Nellie McGraw. She introduced herself sweetly, said she was so glad they were safe, wrote that she'd love to meet them. She mentioned a house in Abilene with a dog and a big garden and 2 bedrooms just waiting for them. She even included a photo of herself, smiling too wide, wearing a lace blouse, and of her house, neat and white with flowers out front. Joe pushed the letter away. She looks fake. Clara was quiet. What if she's nice? Harvey's heart cracked a little at that. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to plant fear. Some people mean well and still do harm, he said gently. What if they make us go? Clara asked, her voice so small it nearly broke him. I'll fight, Harvey said, with everything I've got. Clara nodded. But that night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes locked on the window like she was waiting to be taken. Joe was angry. She stopped drawing, snapped at pickles, didn't want to sit on Harvey's lap or help with chores. She said things like, why'd she wait till now? And what if she's lying? It all boiled over on Christmas Eve. They were in the kitchen decorating cookies. Clara accidentally knocked a flower tin over, and Joe shouted, why can't you just be careful? Clara burst into tears and ran to her room. Harvey followed her, found her sitting by the bed, head buried in her arms. I didn't mean to make her mad, she sobbed. I don't know how to do this right. Maybe I really don't belong here. Harvey knelt beside her. Clara, listen to me. You belong here because this is your home. Not because you never mess up. Not because you do everything perfect. But because I love you. Joe loves you. And we're family. She clung to him then, shaking. He carried her back to the kitchen. Joe stood there looking ashamed. Harvey knelt again and pulled her close too. We're all scared, he said, but we're together, and that matters more than anything. The next morning was quiet. Snow had dusted the trees. The girls opened their little wooden horses and screamed with joy. Joe named hers Buttons. Clara named hers Fern. Later that afternoon, Miss Helen stopped by with gifts and a letter of her own. It's from my cousin, she said. She's a family court lawyer in Austin. She pulled everything she could on Nellie McGraw. Harvey opened the folder. Nellie had filed for bankruptcy 3 years back. Lived alone. Never had custody of any child. No criminal record, but no record of stable caregiving either. She looks nice on paper, Helen said, but she's just trying to fill something in herself, not thinking about what's best for them. Harvey folded the papers slowly. His chest felt like it could finally expand again. That night, he took the girls sledding down the hill behind the barn. They screamed and laughed the whole way. Joe hit a tree stump and tumbled into the snowbank, breathless and grinning. Clara built a crooked snowman and called it Uncle Ben. When the stars came out, they sat by the fire with cocoa in hand and pickles curled in Joe's lap. Harvey stared at the girls' faces, flushed and content. He thought about Lydia, about the life he'd lost, and the one he'd stumbled into by accident and then held onto with both hands. He thought about how scared he still was, how that fear didn't disappear just because the sun came out. But mostly, he thought about how deeply he loved these girls. Not like a guardian, not like a man who took pity, like a father. And that was enough to keep going, no matter what came next. The year turned again. Snow melted slowly off the fence posts, and birds returned to the trees behind the barn, seeming like they were reminding the world it was still alive. Life on the ranch slipped into its rhythms. Feedings, firewood, Joe losing boots in the mud, Clara bringing in eggs like sacred treasures. On the surface, things looked steady, but the shadow of that letter never fully left. Not in Harvey, not in Clara, and certainly not in Joe, whose sharp tongue had gotten even sharper in the weeks after Christmas. Nellie McGraw hadn't followed up with another letter. But Harvey wasn't naive. She hadn't gone away either. Word from Sheriff Rowland confirmed that Nellie had now hired her own lawyer and had been quietly gathering information. Medical records, court transcripts, anything that could help her case if she filed for visitation. Rowland didn't sugarcoat it. She's got money, Harvey. She's not the same as Marion. If she wants this bad enough, she might cause some real trouble. Harvey took the news with a nod and a clenched jaw. But inside, it triggered something deeper than legal fear. It dragged him back, way back, to the February day Lydia died. Not just the pain of losing her, but the sick helplessness of not being able to stop it. That was the worst part. He'd done everything right. Still, she bled out before the doctor arrived. And just like that, the life he'd built crumbled. And now, here he was again, raising something tender, something pure, and again, someone out there was threatening to take it. He tried to hide it, tried to smile through breakfast, laugh at Joe's ridiculous snowball-throwing tactics, sit patiently with Clara as she practiced reading out loud. But the cracks showed. He was quiet longer, less patient, shorter in tone. The girls noticed. They always did. Clara retreated into herself more. She started rereading the same book over and over, The Secret Garden, until the pages were soft at the edges. Harvey noticed how she circled the word orphan with her pencil, how she paused whenever the main character talked about not being wanted. He didn't know how to fix it. All he could do was sit next to her and read along. Joe, on the other hand, got louder, angrier. She slammed doors, argued about dinner, rolled her eyes at everything, even Miss Helen. One evening, when Harvey asked her gently to clean up her art supplies, she exploded. You don't even want us anymore. You just pretend. You're scared of everything. The words hit like a slap. He stood frozen for a moment. Then, without raising his voice, he said, I'm scared because I love you. Because I'd fall apart if someone took you away. Joe stared at him, blinking. Her face crumpled, and she bolted from the room. Miss Helen was there that night. She followed Joe to the porch and sat with her, wrapped her in a shawl, didn't say a word, just held her while she sobbed. Harvey stood at the window, watching, feeling like he was 15 years old again and completely out of his depth. Later, Helen came back in and said she thinks she has to act tough because she's terrified it'll all get ripped away again. Harvey sat down hard. I don't know how to stop that fear. You don't, but you keep showing up, and you tell her the truth, even when it's messy. So he did. That night, when Joe finally came back inside, he was waiting at the foot of the stairs. She looked down, guarded and tired. Come sit with me a minute, he said. She hesitated. Then she did. He took a deep breath. You were right earlier. Her brow furrowed. About what? I am scared. All the time. And not just because of Nellie or the court. I'm scared because the last time I loved someone this much, I lost them. And I didn't know if I'd survive that again. Joe said nothing, but her hand crept toward his. I tried to keep people out for a long time after Lydia died. I thought that made me strong. But then you two came along, and I realized strong don't mean hard. It means choosing to love, even when you're scared. Joe's lip quivered. But what if she takes us anyway? I'll fight. I'll fight until I can't breathe. And if someone makes me give you up, they'll have to tear my heart out to do it. Joe fell against his side, hugging him so hard it hurt. He let her cry into his shirt, let the tears soak through because some pain had to leak out somewhere. The next morning, Clara came to him with something in her hands. It was a drawing. Him, Joe, Clara, and Lydia. He recognized her from a photograph that hung in his bedroom. Clara had drawn her holding hands with them all, standing on a hill under a wide sky. I know she's not here, Clara said softly, but I think she'd like us. Harvey stared at the picture, the weight of it making his chest feel both heavier and lighter. She'd have loved you more than anything. Clara smiled. Then maybe we don't have to be scared all the time. The thought came early that year. Birds chirped louder. The ground softened, and buds started pushing through the dead branches. With it came a court notice. Nellie had officially filed for visitation. Harvey's stomach turned when he read the papers. They were full of neat legal words that didn't care about bedtime songs or burned biscuits or the sound of Joe's laughter when she jumped in puddles. The court had scheduled a hearing in 2 weeks. He didn't tell the girls right away. Instead, he drove out to the place where Lydia was buried. He hadn't been in almost 3 years. The stone was worn. A little moss clung to the edges. He knelt beside it, touched the carved name with dirt-cracked hands. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted out loud. "I'm trying to be the man you be proud of. But I keep failing, Liddy. I keep doubting." The wind moved gently through the trees. They deserve more than a broken man who's still figuring out how to breathe some days. He didn't expect an answer. But as he sat there, a thought settled in his bones. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about presence, about showing up, even when you were broken. He left the cemetery with a plan. At home, he called Miss Helen, then Ben. He organized the paperwork, the testimonies, the school records, the statements from neighbors who saw the girls thrive. He even wrote a letter, his own words, to the judge, explaining not just how he'd cared for Clara and Joe, but how they'd saved him. He also finally sat the girls down and told them what was coming. "We're going to court again. Miss Nellie wants to visit, and the judge has to decide if that's what's best for you." Clara looked panicked. Joe balled her fists. But he continued, "No one's taking you away. We've been through worse, and we're not going back." They nodded, and this time, when Joe hugged him, Clara did too. The hearing came fast. Nellie was there, looking neat and well-kept, wearing another too-wide smile. But this time, Harvey wasn't scared of her. She spoke first, said she just wanted a relationship with her nieces, that she respected the current guardian, but wanted a chance. Then Harvey spoke. He didn't stumble. He didn't hide. "I'm not their blood, but I'm their father in every way that matters. I've held them through nightmares, taught them to trust again, and watched them become who they were always meant to be. I can't promise to be perfect, but I will promise to never leave them. Ever." The judge was quiet. Then he asked the girls to speak. Clara went first. She stood on a step stool and looked the judge right in the eye. "We don't know that lady. She says she wants to see us, but she didn't come when we were alone in the woods. Mr. Harvey did, and he's been here every day since." Joe added, "We already found our home." The judge took his time. Then, finally, he said the words Harvey had been praying for. "Visitation denied. Custody secured. Case closed." Outside the courthouse, Joe ran down the steps whooping. Clara clung to Harvey like a leaf in a storm. "I told you," Harvey whispered into her hair. "We're not going back." And finally, the shadow that had been looming since that hot July day lifted. That night, they lit a fire and made popcorn. Clara fell asleep on the rug with pickles in her arms. Joe sat beside Harvey on the couch, her head resting on his chest. "You don't have to be scared anymore," she murmured, echoing his own words back to him. And for the first time in years, Harvey believed it. Spring moved in quiet, like it had been waiting for them to finally rest. The trees behind the barn turned full and green again, and the sky stopped holding its breath. Life on Harvey Langston's land settled into something soft and steady, no longer edged with fear. There were no more papers in the mailbox, no more courthouse summons, no more talk of strangers, just mornings filled with the smell of coffee and warm bread, chickens pecking in the yard, and the quiet sound of 2 little girls waking up in a house that finally felt like theirs. Clara and Joe seemed lighter now, like they'd been carrying invisible weights and had finally set them down. Clara started humming when she worked in the garden, planting marigolds and carrots like she'd been doing it her whole life. Joe got bolder, climbing trees, chasing frogs, telling stories, so while Harvey couldn't tell if they were dreams or truth. They still fought, still had tears, still got scared of the winsome nights. But now, when fear came, they had a place to land. It didn't swallow them whole. And Harvey, He found himself breathing easier, deeper. The worry that had gripped him for so long had loosened. He didn't check the locks 5 times anymore. He didn't wake at every sound. He just lived. And in those quiet days, something else bloomed too. Something he hadn't thought he'd ever feel again. It had started slowly with Helen. She still visited, of course. She'd always been there, books in hand, sleeves rolled, eyes kind. But lately, Harvey had started seeing her differently. Not just as a teacher or a friend. She wasn't just the woman who helped his girls read or braided their hair on Sundays. She was the one who noticed when Clara was overthinking, who knew when Joe needed time to burn energy or space to cry. She moved through their lives like she belonged. And Harvey had started wanting her to stay. One evening, after supper, he walked her to her wagon like always. The moon was climbing, slow and round, and Helen's hair shimmered silver in the dusk. She turned to him before climbing up. "You're different now," she said softly. "So are they. You've built something good here. I didn't do it alone." She smiled. "I know." He hesitated. Then, quietly, "You ever think about not going home at the end of the night?" She didn't answer right away, just stepped a little closer. "You asking me if I'd stay?" "I'm saying it doesn't feel right when you leave." Helen looked up at him. "It hasn't for a long time." That night, he told the girls. They were sitting on the porch swing, Clara curled beside him, Joe with her legs dangling over the edge. "I asked Miss Helen if she'd stay," he said, voice steady. "Not for dinner. For good." Joe blinked. "Like live here. Like be a part of our family." Clara sat up. "You mean like a mama?" Harvey swallowed. "If you want that." They didn't answer right away. Just looked at each other, that silent language only they spoke. Then Joe said, "We already picked her." The next Sunday, under the tree where Lydia used to sit and read, Harvey and Helen exchanged vows. It was simple, just the girls, Ben, and the preacher. Clara held the flowers. Joe handed over the rings. Pickles meowed through the whole thing. When it was done, and Helen kissed him, Harvey felt something deep and quiet settle in his bones. Not fireworks, not lightning, just the soft, undeniable truth that he wasn't alone anymore. The house changed after that, but not in big ways. Helen moved her books. Her laugh filled the kitchen. She started teaching Clara piano and helping Joe write a book about a girl who could talk to animals and punch bad guys in the nose. Harvey built a new swing under the old oak, big enough for all 4 of them. They'd sit there some nights, Joe pressed against his side, Clara leaning into Helen, watching the stars come out. And one evening, Clara asked if they could hang up Lydia's picture in the hallway. "She started this," she said. "She made space for us, even if she never knew it." So they did. And when the wind blew through the house, lifting curtains and making the lanterns flicker, it felt like a blessing, not a ghost. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic endings, just quiet days full of new habits, new laughter, and the gentle rhythm of healing. One night, as Harvey tucked the girls into bed, Joe looked up and whispered, "You're not scared anymore." He paused. "What makes you say that? Your eyes don't look like they're waiting for bad things." He smiled and kissed her forehead. "It's easier not to be scared when I know you're home." She grinned, half asleep. "You're home too." And he was, at last.